with that, I think we're ready to get started.
Okay. Hello, can you all hear me okay? Okay. So I will prompt you to begin to fill out the survey during the presentation, just to provide you with some context for it. And we'll have 15 minutes for each part of the survey. One is on New Mexico trees, and one is on insect and disease threats. You guys are the experts. We really want your input on what's important to you and what you're encountering. So this presentation is about the preparation of the Urban Tree Environmental Insect and Disease Threat Response Guide. We'll just call that the Urban Tree Threat Response Guide for Arizona and New Mexico. That's a little less of a mouthful. And this is the project team preparing it, and I'll introduce myself during this portion of it. We obtained funding to prepare this guide, and we started work in January of last year. We'll finish this portion up in the end of June to actually prepare the response guide, excuse me, at the end of September. And we also received additional funding to create a website to make this a more user-friendly body of information for you to access, especially out in the field from using your iPhone or your tablet. So this is our team. Corey Dolan is with Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. She's the oversight person working in concert with New Mexico State Forestry Division. I'm the project manager. I'd like to tell you what I'm not, and then I'll tell you what I am. I'm not an entomologist. I'm not a botanist. I'm not a certified arborist. What I am is a longtime professional project manager. My academic background is in hydrology and water resources. I also have a master's degree in nutritional biochemistry. And I have a lot of experience working with the environment, working with sustainable design, teaching, and taking large bodies of information, assimilating the information, and putting it back out in user-friendly formats. So that's why they asked me to oversee this project. Working with me on this is Rafael de Granade. She's a fellow scientist, and she and I think alike in terms of assimilating large bodies of information. She's the one actually assembling very detailed spreadsheets for each insect and disease threat. And we also have Beverly Babb, who's the executive director of Arizona Community Tree Council, who is also a pretty brilliant website designer and does a lot of outreach and coordination. So the recipients of this are primarily the two state forestry departments for Arizona and New Mexico. But in addition to that, all tree and landscape professionals. And I'd like to actually sort of poll this room a little bit to see who we're talking to here. So how many of you are certified arborists? Okay, and how many of you work in the tree service or landscape service industry? The majority. Okay, how about cooperative extension, university type affiliations? Okay, and transportation departments, anybody who's not like in government, dealing with trees along roadways and things like that. Okay, so I guess we've got a pretty good idea of who's in the room. And that means you are the hands-on people out there looking at the trees and looking at their problems. That's exactly what we want to get information from you for. And we have other groups that would be interested in this, the general public, nonprofits, universities, etc. So very, very, very simple flow chart right here. There's more complicated ones later on. This shows how we want to transmit this information. So you're the user. Somebody who's dealing with a tree and noticing it has problems is the primary user. You know, if you're a homeowner and you're a user, then you at any point can consult a tree expert. You guys are also the tree experts. And the actual tree owner, the experts in the trees, they have their own dialogue going on. But once you decide to try to figure out what the problem is and address it, the first thing we want to do is explain what integrated pest management is and why that's a good tool to start with. And once you have a tree, it's having problems, and you start with taking an integrated look at it, and in particular, addressing any environmental factors that are stressing that tree out. Let's try watering it first. Maybe that's what the problem is. And if that doesn't solve your problem, you go on to carefully observe symptoms and eventually try to identify an insect or disease threat that might be hurting that tree. That's the simple approach to it. Now, we're charged with addressing this for urban forests. And there is not a real formal definition of urban forests that I can find from the US Forest Service or the state departments. But you can sort of, if it's not a national forest or a state forest or a completely natural native tree forest, it's probably an urban forest. That means it's going to have non-native trees associated with it. It's going to have buildings that need to be protected. And it includes it's a very broad definition. If I have a tree in my backyard, I'm part of Tucson's urban forest. That's where I'm from. So we're just going to go for a very broad definition of that. Now, which trees are in Arizona and New Mexico's urban forests? We need to do that in order to identify threats that can be a problem for them. We looked around trying to find the tree list. There isn't a universal list for either Arizona or New Mexico. So I started assembling tree lists from different jurisdictions. And you can see there for New Mexico, which jurisdictions have surveys. Maybe they have a recommended tree list. Sometimes larger bodies of government make these lists. So starting with that, assimilating information from 25 different jurisdictions, we came up with 170 tree species for New Mexico. Did the same exercise for Arizona, which actually turned out to have more tree species because since it's in that desert elevation, they're pulling a lot more drought tolerant, heat tolerant trees from other continents than maybe New Mexico is doing right at this time. Now, as we look at these tree lists, we need to anticipate how these lists are going to change going into the future. And there are right now exercises going on in both New Mexico and Arizona to identify climate resilient trees that will be useful in the urban areas going 50 or 100 years into the future. So this means a tree from Mexico might be working its way up into more northern latitudes and to be used in the future. So when we assembled this tree list, we started looking at trees from, in particular, native trees that maybe aren't used so much right just yet, but will be increasingly used, and also other broader lists of drought tolerant trees. So urban heat island, drought, and there's a lot of initiatives going on right now to increase the urban canopies. Tucson, average urban canopy in Tucson, for example, is only 6%. That's dangerously low. You heard on the previous presentation this morning, 30% is a better canopy coverage, very inequitably applied, even at 66%, at 6%. So lots of trees are going to go into the ground. And we need to be careful about which trees we're planting. And we want to make sure that those climate resilient trees that are on these lists are included in our analysis. Okay, so here's the final tree list. Came up with about 85 different tree genera and close to 300 different species. Just a small job, right? Identify all the threats for that many trees. These are divided up between conifers, broadleafs, with a separate assessment for fruit trees. Of course, those are broadleaf trees, but they have more economic implications and threats that attack fruit and create economic issues. We wanted to sort of call those out separately. And of course, palm trees, which you guys don't have much of here, but those are a really large population of trees in Arizona. So in order to collapse that list a little bit, quite a bit actually, we conducted a survey similar to one you're going to do in a minute in Arizona last September. And we had, that was on a workshop day. It wasn't the full conference day, so I only had about 40 people there. But with that information, we were able to assimilate input. And that was very much skewed towards Phoenix and Maricopa County. That is the largest population center in Arizona. You're probably going to get a similar skew here toward Albuquerque and Santa Fe, you know, and the southern part of the state. And these are the results we got. So from the initial tree list, we did ask them if we missed anything, and we only missed about 5 trees, 5 species. So that was pretty good. It meant that was a thorough list of trees that might be encountered. Interestingly, the only tree that the people who filled out the survey had not encountered was the Dawn redwood. So every one of those, that long list of trees, people had encountered in their work. And here's just a highlight of some of the top species. So obviously, this is skewed towards the low desert. Acacia is not the tree that comes most to mind in New Mexico. One thing about how these are tallied, we have both the genera, and you can open your surveys now and take a quick look at that for the first page. We have the genera, and we also have species under it. So say you encounter a sweet acacia, that gets a tick mark. So there's a lot of different species of acacia, and that's why it ends up, when you tally it up, being a very dominant plant. And then you can see the other ones that came up. So now I'd like you to just, what we're going to do, fill this out. We'll assimilate, you know, we'll tally all of this up and compare it with the Arizona list and end up prioritizing those tree genera, the plural for genus, that we will focus on as we create our threat guide. And for those people online, there is a link there, and I believe Marisa has provided that also, perhaps to the online chat room or some other location. Basically, we want to know where in New Mexico you work. This is important because it tells us sort of, you know, we want to make sure that we represent the whole state. So it's good to know where you are geographically and what urban trees do you observe in your work? Which trees are you encountering? Which ones do you see having issues with? So as you go down this list, oh yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah, this one, I didn't have any issue with that, but I've dealt with it, I pruned it. Now this one I've got a real issue with, seeing die off in ash or whatever. Go ahead and mark that. So we're gonna take about 15 minutes and go ahead. If you don't get it done in that 15 minutes, there'll be time on the break and stuff to keep working on it. And I'm just gonna kind of float around and see if anybody has questions or. So it's 1:20 now, we'll stop at 1:35. And by the way, on the cover page there, I invite you to share your name and contact information if you would like to be on a distribution list about this project. Otherwise, you're not obligated to do that. I just sort of want to know what part of the state you're working in. But if you want to be on our distribution list to be alerted to our progress, we won't bother you very often, maybe once a quarter. So feel free to fill that out. Okay, I know some people are still working, but I'm going to keep going because we have a lot of material to cover and you will get more chances to do this. So we mentioned that integrated pest management is the first place to start. And we have a lot of environmental and cultural challenges to our urban trees. Here's the Drought Monitor from last March. And just this January, after a lot of the Southwest had a pretty good December rainfall events, but still, New Mexico in particular is still in conditions of extreme drought and exceptional drought in some locations. So this is probably our new future. I know the average annual rainfall is going down as they get more years of record, and it starts to counteract the previous century of rainfall data, starting to tick down on that average annual rainfall data. And we also face problems with wildfire. I know about this one. I did the trimming on that house. Happened to be a really hot June. There'd been a lot of local wildfires. This is in Sonoyta, Arizona. So I got out there, I used Firewise principles, took down a bunch of manzanita, trimmed up the oak, and got a guy with a chainsaw to give me a hand. And went back up to Tucson, got a call at noon. The house is okay, there's been a fire. Overnight, a fire swept through this subdivision with like 115 houses in just a matter of hours. It was June, super hot, super dry lightning set it off, and really, really windy. But fortunately, with that Firewise trimming, saved the house and the big oak tree there. So this is very much an important environmental concern now for the urban wild fringe of residential properties. And I know that this is a big concern in northern New Mexico. The other, another important cultural impact is this absurd pruning. Way over the top pruning is one of my hobbies, is going around taking pictures of trees that have been ridiculously over pruned. Hurts the structure, leaves the trees subject to sunburn and insect infestation. And in Tucson, in 2020, we had 4.2 inches of rainfall that year and 115-degree temperatures. And we lost a lot of Aleppo pines and eucalyptus trees, large, drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant, non-native trees that nobody had ever watered before. And they just didn't get the message to water these trees in time to save them. And a lot of them died. And it takes, you guys probably know this better than I, but it takes what, $4,000 or $5,000 to remove a tree like that to get it down safely. So these are just a few of the environmental and cultural impacts that we also want to address at this website. So we asked the Arizona folks which of these threats they thought were important. We provided them with a list. They told us the relative importance of that to them. You have a page like this. You can take a glance at what the Arizona folks thought were important. Managing soil, irrigating correctly, fertilizing correctly, mulching correctly, mulch really important, and pruning correctly, in addition to watering trees that are in stress. So this is just a one-pager in your survey. Some of you already got to it, but if you haven't, you can take a quick page forward to that page, which is page 10. Take a minute to think about that, and really important to add your own thoughts of other things we should cover in terms of directing people who have problems with trees to things that they can fix that are not insect or disease related. And by the way, if you give me your name and your email contact information, in about a month from now, I'll send you back the results of this survey, put in that sort of chart form. So you can see what everyone in this room prioritized. Okay, next, we needed to get the list of insect and disease threats. So to start that list, we got recommendations from the forestry departments. We looked at regional field guides on insect and disease problems in Arizona and New Mexico. And we started out with an initial list. We also looked at emerging threats that are showing up nationally at the APHIS website, that's the USDA website. And we want to make sure to get those elements on that list that are getting close to us geographically. So they may not be here now, but they're coming. They're coming at us from California or Texas or other parts of the country. And in compiling this, we ended up with 175 threats, which is a lot. So this list needs to be compressed a little bit. We did sort of group aphids and mistletoes, problems that the solution to them is pretty consistent. You don't have to know exactly which species of aphid you have to know how to treat it. But many of these we kept individual. And we started grouping them in order to figure out what order in which to research these based on a quick assessment of their fatality. Now, let's see, so I'm not an entomologist. I wasn't familiar with this literature before, but as I started going out and looking things up, there's a huge range of information on any given species. So you might find 3 paragraphs in one picture, or you might find a scholarly journal article by an entomologist that's 10 pages long, and it tells you every tiny detail of each instar of the larva. And what we are trying to do here is do that work for you guys to look at that broad availability of research and compress it into a really user-friendly, quickly understandable summary of what you're looking at and what to do about it. So we prioritize this by fatality. Now it's interesting. If we found any article anywhere, we might look at 10 articles. And one of them said, not usually, but potentially under certain circumstances could be fatal. I mean, it's really interesting. Even an aphid under the worst circumstances can tip a tree over. So we erred on the side of fatality when we prioritized this list, and we continued our research. And we focused on Arizona and New Mexico sources. And then we went around to all the states surrounding Arizona and New Mexico. And then we went on to other parts of the country. There are compendiums of this information in Iowa and Florida and Oregon. Other countries have large websites with a lot of this information. So we collected that, and we ended up with a list of 141 tallied potential threat species, which we handed out to the Arizona crowd. And this is what they came back with. So this is a 2-page long summary. And of all those species, these were the sort of the top hits. I don't know if these look familiar to you in terms of what you're dealing with. We want to make sure we understand what's going on in your environment. So these were people, tree care specialists, who had dealt or were familiar with these insect and disease threats. You notice it sort of tapers off. And on the second page, you get down to, well, nobody had any balsam woody aldehydes. Okay, so there really weren't that many threats that somebody hadn't seen. You know, we can't really address every one of those, but you can see that there really is a large number of pests that can affect our urban trees. So this is the last part of the survey, and if you haven't already gotten there, you're going to go to the threats page, same with the online folks. And we want to know, have you encountered this threat in your own trees or in your professional life? And which trees were affected by it? Texas root rot's pretty broad spectrum threat. Which trees did you see having it, if that's something you've seen? And what were the negative impacts to the tree? Was it just damaged? Was it aesthetic? Did it die? So this is the past part of the survey. And when you're done with this, I'll show you how we're going to use this information. Okay, I'm going to keep going, and on the throughout this presentation and on the break.
I want to take this survey home. I'm not going to fill it out because I don't have really answers.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'd like to get, on this.
Just tear the front page off and give it to me.
That's part of the survey.
Here's, find one on a table that's loose, and there's
Huh?
one right, there's an extra one right there. Oh, Lord, where did I put down the remote control? Anybody see the remote control? Probably. Anybody see a long remote control? Bad habit. Okay. So you may have noticed that toward the end of your survey, I want to find out what form you want this information in. And by far, the least favorite form that Arizona wanted was in a hard copy. Nobody wants a big fat report that they got to carry around in their truck. People wanted to be able to access this information on their computers or a handheld device. And one important thing about this is that this is designed for people to access information based on the tree, the name of the tree, the species or the genus of the trees, like Fraxinus covers all the ash trees. So it's not my job to tell people how to identify trees. I'm not taking that one on. So if you guys know of good tree identification apps or software, please write that down on that last page of the survey so we can recommend to people where they can go to get their trees identified. There was a strong preference to have this information provided in an app. Like, oh, type in yellow curling leaves and pop out with a threat. We don't have the money to do that. We're going to try to make it as user-friendly as possible. If we get additional money, we'll go the extra step to create an app. Okay, so this is how we're going to present the information. We're going to develop this website. And at this website, you can download or open a PDF of a report. It will look like a report. It'll have information about integrated pest management and the dominant trees and the dominant threats. But in addition to that, and we will have information about integrated pest management, we will have a searchable directory. And I'll show you how that works later in the presentation, but you will be able to look in that directory, indicate some symptoms and species, and be able to pop out with some threats. And this will be done in December of this year. So here's a complicated flow chart. This is the same as the other one, but it tells you all the more detailed steps. So we have the user and the expert and the tree. You have to know the name of the tree to kind of keep going through the system. Next, you can go to the website, and if you download the PDF of the report, this is what you'll get. You'll get information about IPM for environmental, cultural management. We'll have what we call a snapshot. Personally, I don't want to read sentences anymore. I want information in bullets. I want you to take out all of those extra words and just give me the beef and put a bullet in front of it so I can quickly scan it. And I think a lot of us are beginning to be like that. So when I prepare this information, that's how I prepare it. Bulleted, visual, quick, with big headlines telling you what you're looking at. So I'm calling these things snapshots. And you'll see some examples as we go through here. In the integrated pest management section, you'll find out about environmental threats. We'll have a page on some of the others, and then we'll refer you to additional sources of information. So let's see what that looks like. Here's an example of a summary of environmental management. So that's sort of the list you guys are doing right now, only this will be more detailed, but it'll still be bullety and it'll have some visuals in there. Really quick information, and it will refer to useful additional articles, which will be attached probably as a PDF or as a link. So if you want to know about FireWise, I'm not going to regurgitate that. I'm going to send you to a FireWise manual. Or if you want to know how to water a tree during drought stress, in Arizona, we put together a quick summary of this to alert people to water trees during that really hot summer. So a lot of those topics will have that additional information. And same with mechanical management, pruning. You'll be referred to pruning sources, PDFs of pruning sources, etc. Same for biological management and chemical management. Now, the next step, once you've assimilated that, and what this is really for is to give people the vocabulary, the terminology that they're going to encounter when they actually get a hold of their threat. So what is biological treatment? This provides a background on that. So the next step, if you can cure your tree, if you don't cure your tree with environmental management, is to go to the snapshot that we call the tree genera snapshot. And this is what that looks like. So this is for fraxinus or ashes, ash trees. Here's the list, and I'm going to give you some close-ups. I know this is kind of hard to see from the back. So look at the next close-ups of this. Technology whizzes. Not advancing, maybe the battery wore out. Can you advance me? Okay, we're going to list for fraxinus. So here's the deal. We are not going to make a separate page for every Mexican ash tree in Arizona, New Mexico. That's too much detail. We're going to do this by genus. Because typically, if something bothers one ash tree, it'll bother another ash tree. So that's what we're going for here is the genus. These are the species of that genus that you find in Arizona, New Mexico. And when you look at the top axis of that matrix, you're seeing symptoms. What's the state of the tree? Sometimes if a tree is wounded or it's just been planted, it's more vulnerable to some of these threats. And now you're looking at descriptions of symptoms, curling leaves, discolored, injuries to the bark, etc. On the left axis, you find the threats. And you'll see here, fatal, 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 SSS, AA, those are degree of fatality. Severity, fatal, structural damage, or aesthetic damage. Now, when you look at these together, you see these X's. So here you are, you're looking at your tree. And you're going, okay, I did happen to just plant it. And the leaves are yellowing, and there are cuts in the leaves, and the canopy is thinning, etc. You look across, you figure out which species has those characteristics. And then on your matrix, on this flow chart, you go back over to possible threat snapshots. So I'm using fraxinus and emerald ash borer as my examples to show you how this works. So this looks like it has the symptoms of an emerald ash borer. Here's the snapshot of emerald ash borer. Okay, boom. Okay, I see what the life stages are. I see pictures of the symptoms. And let's go take a closer look at what's going on here. So you want to be looking for these life stages on your trees. You want to be looking for these very specific symptoms. Emerald ash borer has D-shaped exit holes. It's a very characteristic symptom of that disease. And if that looks like what you're dealing with, you can keep going and you get to this thing called the severity scale. So one really big challenge of going into the threat literature is that sometimes you have to read 5 articles before somebody tells you how bad it is for the tree. Is it aesthetic? Does it cause structural damage or does it kill it? And if it kills it, how long does it take? It's not in your face. So we really want to put this in your, so to speak, in your face, okay? And we're using these severity scales. So like in an aphid, we typically have this severity scale. Right away, okay, I got aphids, you look at that, you go, okay, probably not going to kill the tree. Except if you have some pre-existing conditions, it might, basically be aesthetic, but if the tree is particularly vulnerable, it could become fatal. So we want to we're going to add an element on this where we go, what's the pre-existing condition of the tree? Is it already stressed? What's stressing it? Some things are mostly aesthetic or structural, but then, maybe 5% of the trees might die after a long period of time. Okay, now you know. That's mostly what you're dealing with, but it could kill it in bad circumstances. And then, if it is fatal, if we know how long it takes, we're going to mark that down. So you know how quickly you better get moving. And maybe it takes 5 years once you get some threat. It turns out emerald ash borer will kill your tree in 1 year. By the time you know what's going on, that tree is probably dead. So this is part of that effort to make this really user-friendly and quick to understand. Next, if we go back to look at this format, we're going to go to an overview of the threat and then through the rest of this so you can get a closer look at it. So an overview. By the way, the closest emerald ash borer has so far gotten to Arizona, New Mexico is somewhere around Boulder. So it is in the hood, right? It's coming at us. I talked to the ladies who were out there at the table with for Colorado trees and plants, and they said they've now considered to be endemic in Boulder, but they're still quarantining around that county, but it's moving out. It's killed millions of ash trees in the United States. The whole rest of the country is really upset about this threat. There's lots and lots of additional information about it because it's really hitting trees hard. Usually by the time you see signs and symptoms, it's so heavily infested, the tree's going to die. But that does clue you into maybe taking care of adjacent trees that might be vulnerable to it. And if you want to save a tree, you better start early. So that's an overview. Again, we'll list the species of Fraxinus. We lead people to, you're going to turn this thing over if you want more detail. It can be controlled through cultural, that means pruning, don't move firewood, things like that. Biological treatments and chemical treatments. Those are going to be your options, details on the back. There is a serious threat alert for EAB is its acronym. The USDA hotline wants to know if you've seen this. That's how concerned people are. And we will provide links to more experts you can get help with. And then we provide a map or some verbal description of where it is, relative to Arizona, New Mexico, or within Arizona and New Mexico. So now, if you really think you got an EAB, flip the page, turn this snapshot over, and on the back, there's the excruciating detail. So we're going to talk about more symptoms, how to identify it, what are similar insects and diseases. State Forestry and Arizona said they're getting calls all the time. I saw a green bug, it must be an emerald ash borer. And so you really want to know what you might be looking at instead, so you don't send out an alert that's not accurate. What makes the tree more susceptible? What's the disease process? This is detailed stuff. I don't have to go over this here, but that's what you'll be seeing. More detail on the threat, more numbers to call, and do not transport ash firewood. That's really how this pest gets around. And then the controls, information on that, and additional links. And here is the mother lode of information. For each threat, there is an individual Excel spreadsheet with columns and columns of data that's assimilated into a summary column. And that pops out into these snapshots. That's the process that's going on. So if you would rather use the database, instead, do a directory search instead of using a PDF, you can go to this. You can use the flowchart like this. Now you're going to go, you can go look at the paper copy if you want. Or you can go ahead and scroll, open up the IPM part of the website and it will scroll on your phone. So you can look at this in the field on your phone. Or you can go to the threat directory. There's a directory. And when you go there, what you're going to get is a way to choose what you want to look at. So if you know your tree, you can go up here, and go under broadleaf, go down, punch Fraxinus. If you do that, you'll get a directory display of all of the threats that might affect Fraxinus trees, ash trees. And I'll tell you, if there's a tree with a bullseye on it, it's the ash. That tree has more threats than you can count. That matrix I saw you was maybe a half to a third of the threats that affect that tree. If you want to do your search a little more explicitly, you go down and you start marking tree symptoms. So we're going to have keywords for symptoms: yellow leaves, curling leaves, stippled leaves, blah, 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 all the way down, thinning canopy. Click them, click them, click them, up pops the threat. Or you can type in, if it's Texas root rot you want to know about, type it in and it will go directly to that page. You don't have to tell me the tree. You don't have to tell me the symptoms. Yes. This website isn't there yet. That's what we're making. That's what this is. December 2022. Okay. Yeah, it takes quite a while to engineer these. Yeah. But if you get on the list, we'll let you know when it's up and running. Okay. So when you click on this threat, say you pick emerald ash borer, what you're going to get is a scroll. So I put these side by side, but this is going to scroll on your phone. You're going to get the pictures. You're going to get all that information that was on the snapshot, only this time you can read it on your phone, because those 8.5 by 11s, you can't look at those on a phone. And you'll just go down through the same type of information, the same photos, and there will be links at the end. They'll tell you what keywords are related to this particular threat and additional information. So that's what this project is. We're going to create a report that's 8.5 by 11. Now these slides you see, these are 8.5 by 11s in PowerPoint. That report will be formatted exactly the same way. So if you download the PDF of that, you can stick it on your computer and you can show it as a PowerPoint. Extension, you're a boss in an office, you want people to understand this, you can show it. It's going to be yours. After the quality control is done, right? Not now. So the help we want from you is we will be distributing this draft report around the middle of summer. I will, if your name is on your list, you tell me who you are. I'll let you know when it's available. I won't send it to you. You let me know if you want it. And then I will send it to you and you can comment on it if you'd like. You can attend our quarterly technical meetings. We have another one coming up in probably early March. We'll let you know. It's a Zoom meeting. Share your thoughts and perspectives on, does this work for you? Let's just find out. Is this working for you? Is this good? Okay. If it happens, eh? That's why they hired me, because that's what I do. I make it happen. Somebody's got to. Tell us if you're seeing any emerging threats or trees you're concerned about. Have we left anything off? That's what we just asked you. Or any trees missing or any threats missing? You know of a really great article on Emerald Ash Borer, let me know, although we probably stumbled on it. And this is really important. This is not going to help you if you can't see a picture of the life stages of that insect and the symptoms. And a lot of these photographs are national level. They're not New Mexico trees necessarily. It's not a New Mexico or Arizona context. So if you happen to have a great photograph, and these are my photographs, that's a blue palo verde. It probably has a mite that is attacking these trees in Arizona, and a leaf-footed bug. See, I can use these because I took them. When I'm using these other photographs, I've got to cite them. And I'm going to go mainly to government sources. But if you, as an individual, got a good picture of an attack or a symptom, please let me know. There's my email address. And I will credit you. I probably, I might not give you a whole long, three line items, but I'll put your name on it. And that's basically what I set out to accomplish today. So I'm happy to take questions. We can use the remaining time. I think I'm early. You can finish filling out the forms. And here's the collection box. If you're done with your form, pass it toward the middle of your respective tables and we'll pick it up. We'll just come to the middle from here. And if you're not done, keep working. And here's the box. I'll leave it out right here. Put it in. If you need more time, and for the end of the day, this box will be here all day. Oh yeah, we have entomologists on our technical advisors and stuff like that. That's what these quarterly meetings are. And we'll also be sending about, like John Formby's the entomologist for New Mexico Forestry Division. And we have other entomologists who are engaged in this, some from the University of Arizona and some from Maricopa County. So we definitely, absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole point of its draft right now. Yeah. I don't pretend to be an entomologist and make sure I get it right.
The technical meeting, do we just email you?
If you put your name on the form, I will put it down on my distribution list and I'll let you know. What's that?